Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our School Solutions and Educational Rights for JA webinar. I am very pleased to be able to moderate this session for the Arthritis Foundation. My name is Julie Kieser, and I'm a professor at the MGH Institute of Health Professions. I am a physical therapist by background, and I have a degree in public health as well. And I'm also the mom of two kids who have psoriatic arthritis. My first child was diagnosed when she was 18 months old, and she just graduated. So we have been involved with the school systems from kindergarten through graduation now, and just beginning to sort of get into college. And my other daughter was diagnosed when she was in fourth grade, and is now going into her senior year of school. So our guest speaker tonight is, we're extremely fortunate. She's got wonderful experience in educational rights for JA. She's a lawyer. She's a mom who has a kid who has arthritis. She's been a great advocate for kids who have special needs, and then particularly with including arthritis. So we're super, super happy tonight to have Heidi Goldsmith with us. But before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping things. First, we will have muted all of our attendees for the event, but you can direct any questions you may have for the presentation through Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll start with the presentation, and then we'll reserve some time at the end to answer questions. After tonight's session, you will receive an email asking about your experience. These surveys really help the Arthritis Foundation plan for future events. We do read them, we take your feedback seriously, and they really guide where we go. So please do take some time to fill that out. A recording of tonight's event will also be included in the post-event survey email, as well as it will be available on the Arthritis Foundation's YouTube channel and Webinars Hub. And you can register for upcoming webinars, which are hosted monthly on the Webinars Hub through the Arthritis Foundation. So let's get started by introducing our expert guest, Heidi Goldsmith. Heidi has been serving the needs of children and families in the area of special education for more than 2 decades. Prior to founding Bradley Goldsmith Law, Ms. Goldsmith practiced law at McAndrews Law Offices. During her 19 years at McAndrews Law, Ms. Goldsmith became a shareholder of the firm and was supervising shareholder of the special education department for over 10 years. Ms. Goldsmith is a parent attorney representative to the Stakeholders Council for the Office for Dispute Resolution, which oversees all due process and mediations in the state of Pennsylvania. She also serves on the Professional Advisory Board of the Learning Disabilities of America, as well as the chair of the Bylaws and Policy Committee. So Heidi, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. One of the wonderful things that I have really enjoyed about giving these presentations to families is not only does it allow for us to all learn, but the great thing is there's a lot of time for questions at the end. And I do want to make sure that I get to your questions, because obviously the great thing about this law is it's individualized and every situation is different. And what we're going to do in terms of the presentation is I'm going to start off, and we can go to the first slide if we could, is kind of give you a primer on the 2 main laws and kind of what they look like for kids with JA when it comes to school systems. There is basically the IDEA, which is the law that governs kids with disabilities, but there's also a broader law, which is Section 504. That's 504 plans. And you know, you guys can see me now. So when we think about these things, the first thing I want you to think about is a circle, right? And that's the circle in that is all kids with disabilities. That is 504. Inside that is a little circle called the IDEA, and that's what an IEP is. That's where you have to meet certain more requirements to fall into the little circle. So we're going to kind of discuss both of them as well as the differences, the similarities, but then kind of generally both of them run the same course. So whether it be an IEP or 504, both of these laws were created on the medical model. And when you go to the doctor, before you're supposed to treat or receive treatment, usually they like to give you a test, right? If you go in with a broken leg, even if they see, the bone sticking out of your leg, they're going to give you an x-ray. They're going to figure it out before they decide they're going to do surgery or set it or what the problem is. And that's what both of these laws also work on. So both of them start off with an evaluation report. And when I tell you that is kind of the foundation situation that all of this is going to stem from, and it is so critically important. So one of the things I'm going to tell you right off the bat is whenever you get these evaluation reports, please read them. And it's really important that when you're talking to the district about how JA impacts your child, that is a very individualized situation for every kid, right? There is the level of severity of the impact of JA just on a physical aspect. But let's be candid. The idea that you have a physical aspect with no possible other aspects is just inaccurate. So let me give you some examples. First is, although you have kids who have flare-ups and maybe they are out of school a lot, well, you're just looking at, well, what did we miss academically? But for that child, that social interaction and possible depression because they're not in school, there can be an emotional aspect to that situation as well. So when you think of your child in terms of asking the district to evaluate, you want to make sure you list all of your concerns. Do you have any concerns about social or emotional functioning? Do you have any concerns about the academics, whether it be from not being able to access it or candidly, let's just be real. If we are in pain and our kids with JA are in pain, it is harder sometimes to even just pay attention in the class and get through a class day. And so being able to have that access. So talk about the academics, talk about the socialization, talk about the emotional impact. And the district's supposed to test all that. And there's different tests that they can give. And you really want to have, when you're starting this process, a really clear picture of what your child's needs are. And because from that now stems the IEP and 504. And an IEP is, for lack of a better term, it's a contract. It's basically the district's offerings to you as to what a program is going to be that they're going to offer. It has to be individualized to your child, meaning that if the district ever says to you, oh, we don't do that, or all the kids do this, that is not accurate. Every situation is individualized. The other thing I want to make sure that we're all on the same page is there are a lot of times when you think about education, we have this kind of approach to it as it's very standardized, right? It's brick and mortar for the most part. You go to school, there's different, classes, it's different periods. It's kind of all runs on the same paradigm. The laws are not built on that paradigm, meaning that if your child needs something unique or something that isn't part of the classical education system, they're supposed to provide that. So as oftentimes when I'm talking to parents, what I'll say is break your norms and your beliefs of what education in districts can and can't do, and just describe to me, if you were in a perfect world, and I can't ever guarantee I can get it for you, but in a perfect world, what would your child's program really look like? And that's really what all parents need to start doing when they're approaching this IEP, is the fact, looking at this not from this is the round peg and we're going to try to stick it into that square hole. It really is a situation is, how are we crafting this around this child? How are we making this child's needs be met? Because that is really what the law requires. It is at no cost, meaning that if there's a situation that, and it came up in some of the pre-questions, that there is outside additional tutoring that has to be provided, outside additional physical therapy, people to come to the house to provide supports and services. None of this is at cost to parents. It is called a free, appropriate public education. The law that applies, it's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We shortcut it to IDEA or IDEA. And this is a federal law that addresses all areas of the country. Basically, all 50 states are, and actually some of the territories, are under these rules. Now, one thing I will just caution is I have practiced primarily in Pennsylvania, but I've also handled cases in Washington, D.C., Delaware, Virginia, and Maryland. And I will just say why it is a federal law. Some of these things are very individualized in terms of additional requirements or supports or things that happen within the states. And we can go to the next slide. All right, so who really is eligible for an IEP? And this is where one of the main distinctions come in between a 504 and an IEP. There is a specific list of categories. Now, in terms of for JA, other health impairment, if it basically has a direct impact on a child's ability to access or learn, then that child is eligible for an IEP under other health impairment, purely even just on JA. It can be combined with, obviously JA kids may have other disabilities, speech and language, OT, learning, ADHD, depression, other things that happen to it. But JA alone, you can, while it doesn't say JA, there is a category in which it would fall under. And the disability must affect the child's educational performance and ability to learn. Now, it does require, and this is kind of the distinction, if you do need to have what is known as needing specially designed instruction. And that is really the question of what is specially designed instruction and how is that something that is different than mere accommodations? Because a lot of times when you get to an IEP or 504, there's a lot of overlap in those areas. And we're also going to talk about, as we go on, some suggested accommodations that actually came from the JA toolkit, which is an incredible resource. But the reality of the situation, especially design instruction, is where you have to change how that instruction is delivered to that child. Now, that doesn't mean that child needs to be required to be pulled out of the classroom to provide it. It can be something that's done within the classroom. It may be some additional supports and services, for example, participation in a social skills group, or, for example, for a kid who maybe is having difficulty because they're having a lot of flare-ups. And, listen, I'm a mom and vast majority here are all parents. And even for your kids without disabilities, your biggest fear is what? Who's your kid's going to sit and eat in the lunchroom with, right? That's first day of school, who'd you eat lunch with? I think that's always parents' number one question. And the reality is if your child's missing academics, it's not just academics, but they're also missing that ability to maintain relationships, and just having a situation where we put in something for having that child in the classroom, or not in the classroom. I mean, some kids may, but having, a buddy to eat lunch with, or again, stuff around that. So again, when we're talking about specially designed instruction, we're changing how instruction is delivered. So if the child needs to be pre-taught, post-taught, that, for example, let's say you have a kid with JA who, because they're in pain, have difficulty sustaining the attention needed for them to get all that information in. And so they really need to get the information in more of a chunked format, right? So maybe they need to only do 15 minutes of math and then they're going to tap out. And again, it's related to JA. It's not an attention disorder, but just because of the pain. Well, that's changing how that instruction's to be delivered. And that can be done. And that's part of SDI. So that's kind of the translation from when you're going for pure accommodations, which would be like, just giving some extended time, a separate place to take tests or assignments. We're really changing how we're delivering that instruction to the child. And we can go to the next slide. All right, so here's the 504 plan. Now, one of the things that I will say every time I speak on this, it gets very surprised by this, and it is something that even attorneys for the district, when I deal with them, especially the newer ones, we actually pull up the regulations because they just cannot believe it's in there. But there is nothing in a 504 plan that you cannot get. And people will say, well, it has to be regulated, but you can't have a child going to a learning support environment in a 504 plan. You actually can. The 504 actually says any special education services or supports. So that can include a separate learning environment if that's what that child needs. So, for example, if you have a child who doesn't have a learning disability, but we're going back to the kid who, with a flare up, can't take that large amount of instruction in one sitting time, then it is a situation where you can absolutely have that child maybe go to the learning support environment and get additional supports in that with a teacher so that they're making up kind of that academics. Also, for example, if you have a child who is out of school a lot and maybe because of their flare up, they can't engage in the educational process at all, a 504 plan could say, listen, instead of just having this kid run right back to the regular education, algebra class, we're going to give some additional support outside of the algebra class so that we can again make up those holes and they have a quieter environment to work to get back to where they would be. As with IEPs, 504s are provided at no cost. And again, the act that applies a Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Now, a little caveat, and I think I talk about this a little bit later, they are rewriting it. It's been the first time since, not joking, it is the first time since 1973 that they have touched this law. So we don't know exactly what they're going to do with it. But again, they are rewriting it. Now, one thing that I think is also important, this is why that's kind of highlighted, is the whole point of this federal civil right, and both IDEA and Section 504 are civil rights. So when we talk about this, the districts are not giving a gift to you. They're not giving you extra. This is your civil right. Literally, it's the civil rights as equal to any other civil rights that we have in this society. Kids with disabilities have a civil right to appropriate education. The little bit of difference between 504 and IDEA, though, is 504 was created to stop discrimination. It's basically a stop situation, where IDEA was created to move kids forward and make sure that they're receiving meaningful educational progress. So it's a little bit of a difference in terms of the intent of the civil rights laws. But again, we are dealing with civil rights. And we can go to the next page. All right. So again, when you have a 504, you're going to be going through the evaluative process. With 504 plans, a couple things. One, you are not required to prove your child's disability to get a 504 plan. And that's very clear in the law. If a child is suspected of having a disability, and let's say you go to your school and say, listen, my kid has JA, I want my child evaluated, and they said, oh, well, you're going to need to go get medical documentation. Legally, you don't actually have to do that. That should not stop the process. They actually are required under the IDEA and Section 504 to evaluate all areas. And while there's no requirement to provide medical treatment, they are not required to provide medical treatment. They are required to provide medical evaluations so that they can make sure that they're programming for all needs as needed. So, for example, I'll give you some, again, other examples. If, for example, they say, I had a child once who had a heart issue, and they said, oh, your child can't attend school without clearance from a cardiologist, and the parent's cardiologist. And I can attest from my own experience with my kid with JA, to get into the specialists at our school, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, you call and they'll say, well, we're opening up our books next week for the next 6 months. And so the child was going to be out of school for like 6 months. And we said, no, you've got to provide that medical evaluation. So if there is something in terms of medically based, they are required to do that evaluation as well. So again, if your child has a disability, so you don't have to provide that. And two, 504s do include an evaluation. I cannot tell you how many times I have a parent come to me with a 504, especially for medical reasons, where they simply take a doctor's note, and the doctor might make 3 or 4 recommendations, school-based recommendations, and they just do accommodations, and there's no underlying evaluation. Legally, 504 is very clear. You're supposed to have a complete evaluation. It is supposed to provide standardized testing. So merely just having a 504 plan, you definitely don't. And we're going to talk about one of the reasons and part of how it helps you advocate for your child, the importance of having that evaluation in a little bit. Now, the disability must impact your child's ability to learn in a general education requirement. Again, as I said, 504 has a very broad definition of a disability, but it does and must substantially eliminate one or more activities. Learning is one of them. So if this impacts your child's ability to learn in any capacity, that is, again, qualifies under 504. And if you ask for an IEP and they say your child's not eligible, they are also supposed to evaluate whether or not your child is in need of a Section 504 plan. So that evaluation is supposed to also have occurred at the same time. So definitely, if you're receiving information that your child is quote unquote not eligible, and I'm going to be really blunt and candid right now. A lot of the reasons, and I think as parents, we know this, is if your kid is bright and academically, when they're in class, able to do things or, hold it together or push through and are, pushing themselves, the district is going to say, your kid's fine. Like, what? They're getting all A's. The difficulty, and this is why having that evaluation is so important, because it's documentation. And again, I hate to speak like a lawyer here, but you need to document, because you need to document to them, because how much it takes for your child to do it. Because the reality of the situation is it is only sustainable for so long. And the reality is if your child is killing themselves to make up for what they lose time or make it through or have access to, eventually it's going to take a toll. And that is what the laws are supposed to be geared to, is ensuring that your child isn't having to do all the burden and the extra work to be at the same place as other kids. The laws are to bring your child up to the same place as other kids, with the supports from them. So I think when you're looking at these things, you do need to look at these as not just the outside picture of what it looks like on the outside, but be sure to explain to the district, and you want to document when you're giving your parental input to these evaluations, what it takes for your kid to get to that place of being able to even, to get that A, because your child getting that A probably has to run 10 miles compared to another child without JA. And we can go to the next slide. All right. Okay. So listen, I have, unfortunately, and I love them. I have kids. My youngest is 12, my oldest is 18, and my middle one's 15. So they're all, of course, at this point in time, at some level, touching social media. So I swear I hear more TikTok music in my head than I should. So one of the themes of TikTok, I was like, what are your red flags? So whenever I get to this, so now I'm thinking to myself, so who creates the 504 plan? And this is kind of here are your red flags if this is who's creating your 504 plan. If it is the principal, that should be a red flag. Principals, hey, great. Their roles are wonderful. They have a really important part of the school team. But the reality of the situation is very few principals are very trained on the law in terms of 504, IDEA, special education, understanding what that all is. Most of the time, the principals are more worried about making the system work for their school than making sure the kid is getting what they need. Now, this again is broadening the terms. There are very good principals out there who may have come from special education and are actually really fantastic. But again, we're just talking about, you want to be leery if it's just the principal. I'll be candid with you, if it's the nurse. And listen, my mom was a school nurse. I love school nurses. It is the one drawback is when you were sick as a kid and your mom's a school nurse, you went to school sick because you just laid in the nurse's office all day. But beyond that, the reality of the situation is they're not a special educator. And that's not a criticism. It's the reality. They're going to merely look at this from a medical situation without the understanding of the implications in terms of a learning-based environment. So really, what is a good flag, a green flag? A green flag is that someone from the special education department is leading the group. And if there is nobody, so if you're in a system where it's the nurse who leads it, the guidance counselor who leads it, or the principal who leads it, you should absolutely be asking for someone from the special education department to be there, because it really is important for that person to have input and be able to maybe guide the other team members as to what really constitutes an appropriate 504 plan. You can also bring anybody that you want to bring to the 504. So if you have another parent that's a JA parent, or another parent of a kid with a disability who's worked with the system before, you can bring another parent. I will be candid with you. I absolutely recommend you doing that, bringing someone else with you, because candidly, it is a very stressful situation. You're usually in a room of people who are all experts. They're utilizing lingo that you do not speak. I mean, when you're in education, you can speak entirely in acronyms. And so if I went to, if I'm another educator and I said to them, I said, listen, we're going to do a PTE or PWN to do an ER that's going to include a WISC, a WIAT, maybe an FBA, then we're going to have an ER to then have an either IEP or 504, and then we're going to NOR up or PWN it. And I mean, in a worst case scenario, maybe the parent will ask for an IEE. Now, that, if you're in education, you follow it along with. If you're new to education, you have just said, what foreign language have you speaking? As you can tell, I'm very fun at parties because I can speak all in acronyms. I'm sure I'm great dinner conversationalists. But the reality of the situation is you are dealing with a lot of input coming at you, and having someone else there who is either more experienced or can cut through that, it is a situation that is helpful, and understanding everything that is occurring, because there's a lot of moving parts. I was in an IEP meeting today, and I will tell you there was side conversations coming up. People were coming at different angles, and the parent was there and I was there, but managing those situations is also something that is really a good thing to have there as well. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Again, there is now with the IDEA, there is very specific legal requirements of what has to be in there. It's very outlined. There's nothing like that for 504. So that's the good news. Here's the thing about the 504. There's no requirement, which means it can look like anything. It can actually look exactly like an IEP. It can have progress monitoring. It can have goals. There is nothing legally prohibiting them from doing that. So you can ask for a 504 plan to look any way you wish. If there is a situation where you want progress monitoring, which doesn't normally occur under 504 plan, you can ask for that. But generally it includes accommodation supports and services. It should include the names or the who is going to be providing the service. So if it's a situation where the kid's going to get some, opportunities to meet with the guidance counselor just to kind of, go through some, anything they're concerned about, you definitely want to list that's going to be the guidance counselor, and not just they have them meet with the regular education teacher for 5 minutes. And you want to know the name who's responsible for ensuring the plan is implemented, because if it is, and I will again be perfectly candid, unlike IEPs, I have had not an insignificant amount of situations where the teacher or the people who are supposed to be implementing the 504 don't get communicated to that there is a 504 plan. And what oftentimes the story is, the parents will go to the back to school night, which is usually 2 to 3 weeks after school started, and they will approach the teacher and just say something like, I just want to touch base, sometime soon about the 504 plan. And the teacher will say, oh, I didn't even know they had a 504 plan. So you definitely want to make sure that there's follow-up. Candidly, my recommendation is when you have a new teacher, just give them a copy of it, send it via email saying, just FYI, to make your life easier, I just want to give you a copy of the 504 plan, because again, you want to ensure that from out of the gate that everyone's on the same page. If you're going to a brand new school where there's a new nurse, new principal, I would give it to everybody, because again, you want to make sure that that is communicated right up front. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, so what is best? There is no best. I wish I could tell you that there's always one great answer. To me, the question is, what does the child need? And that is what is best for your child. If you have it, but I will say this, if you are in a school where 504 plans are seen as second, lower class, or less than, you want to be pushing for an IEP. Legally, that's completely inaccurate. 504 plans are held to the same legal rigor as IEPs. They are not considered within the law second-class citizens. And the reality of the situation is if you screw up under 504, that is equally as bad as if you screw up under an IEP. So, but it's how they're treated. So you definitely want to do that. If you're also in a situation where your child's struggling in terms of other things, the JA is beyond just a physical, we just need some supports or accommodations, then you definitely want to be looking for more of an IEP, because unfortunately, while legally everything I am saying is accurate, practically speaking, districts don't believe it. And you're going to be having a lot more battles with a 504 at times, even though legally you're entitled to what you're asking for, legally they're required to provide it, but you're fighting with them to get it. So an IEP will often make it better. Do you know when it may be time to switch? and that's kind of one of those, again, a judgment call with parents. It doesn't and shouldn't impact the kid anyway, but if it's not working, that is the time to switch. And how you would make the switch is basically you reach out to the district and say, listen, I think that unfortunately the level of support that my child's receiving under a 504 plan is not appropriate, and I think we should move to an IEP. But I will also tell you, it can go in the reverse too. So if you're at the point in time that your kid is really sailing and not needing that level of support that they have, you're in a really great spot, then you may want to be moving back to a 504 plan. I will just be candid. My advice is if you can keep them for a variety of reasons, and some of them are with, you can be going through periods of remission and then suddenly you hit a brick wall and you're back in a bad spot. And unfortunately, the education system doesn't quickly respond. And so you're digging out of a hole when you're in those circumstances. So the reality is, you definitely, if you can, don't dismiss them just because right now you're good, because any statements they have is like, listen, if things go bad again, don't worry, we can just jump right back in there. That legally is not how the system runs. They have to go through the whole evaluative process again. So again, if I would not dismiss out of everything, just again, until you are at the point in time that they're exiting from education. All right, we can go to the next slide. Here are some just general tips for securing accommodations. Start early. And again, that's what I'm talking about before is, if you're in a situation where you have the diagnosis, start now. You don't want to have a wait to fail model. And that was really kind of the old IDEA. You had to wait for a kid to fail before you could offer supports and services. You don't want to wait for it to get so bad for your kid that it's no question they need it. You want to be in advance of that. Listen, we know JA, we know how it impacts kids. You know how it impacts your kids. Get those evaluations done, get the supports and services, because it's a lot easier to tweak supports and services in an existing document than it is to create it from scratch. And I will say this, attending board meetings, and here's why that is important, is that your school board, for the most part, has no idea about special education. They truly, when I tell you, have no idea about special education. It is sometimes mind-blowing. And if you're in a situation where you've gone through the whole, gamut of pushing the ball forward, bringing situations and reaching out to school board members is something that's very successful. But I will also say attending meetings and knowing that you're an active member will also get you a better response. And again, get a doctor's note. You definitely want to go in with all information so that you can start things off as soon as possible. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is sample 504 accommodations. And if you see on the right-hand side, there's some recommended sample ones. This actually came from the Educational Rights Toolkit from the Arthritis Organization. And I have to tell you, and that's part of the reason we use it in the slides, it is fantastic. And it's really comprehensive, but there's a lot of other really good information in there. So definitely go take a look, because I know I'm giving you a lot of information, and it's contained in there, and it's a good resource to kind of go back to and look things up. But these are, again, some of them, allowed to make up missed schoolwork. Here's the deal. It's not only allowed, but you want to make sure those 504, there's a plan. How are we going to accomplish this? Because unfortunately, here's what happens. If you don't have a plan for how to make up the missed schoolwork, then it's dependent upon the teacher. So you may have Mrs. Arnold, who will say, listen, take your time, sweetie. Whenever you get it done, you get it in. And then you may have Mr. Arnold, who will say, listen, you got 24 hours to get this back into me. So you want to make sure everyone's on the same page of how any missed schoolwork will be made up. There's also a situation, just FYI, you can not have classwork made up. I mean, if there is work that basically is just kind of reinforcing concepts and the child has the concepts and it doesn't make sense, you can actually excuse for a kid making up work. Giving students a chance to break, move, stretch, and rest. Allowing to leave the class as medically needed. And there's ways to do that do not call the child out. A child can have a pass that they can just show the teacher that they can leave. Having assigned note takers, or teacher provided notes for the kids so the child doesn't have to write as much. Record school supplies that address any hand or strength needs. You can record lectures. They can absolutely record lectures, and they're able to submit oral assignments to assignments and 2 sets of books for home and school. And that's just kind of the general ones that happen. But again, if there are other things that are in there, again, that we talked about, like social emotionally, or other things in terms of academically, for if the kid's having difficulty sustaining attention, if a kid needs a modified school day, all that type of stuff can be part of a 504 plan. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what can parents reasonably ask for? You can ask for how, again, instruction and related services. I always like when I go to the slide, I'm like, oh, yes, correct. Related service. So if your child receives PT, OT, speech, those need to be made up if the child's missing from school. So because unfortunately, you can have kids who, if they're out just for a period of time, especially, for example, if you have a kid who, by Friday, it always seems to be Friday that they miss school because they're just physically exhausted for the rest of the week. And Friday is the day they decide that they're always going to be doing, occupational therapy or physical therapy. You want to make sure there's a plan in place. I still put in COVID precautions, and the reality of the situation is, well, I hope that there's never another flare up of COVID, but the reality of the situation is we're all now more aware of the fact that there are times in our year that, there's the flu, there's other things that can come up. And if there's precautions that are specific to your child that need to happen during that time period so that your child can safely attend school, that is something you can ask for. One of the things, and again, I'm talking about in terms of the law. The law, there was no case law, and there was no guidance in terms of like whether or not you could require for kids with disabilities. And pre-COVID, it really was for kids with who had very severe compromised immune systems, especially if they were undergoing cancer treatment, stuff like that, in terms of masking. The case law is very clear at this point in time that if your child, and again, this is across the country, not just Pennsylvania, but Virginia, Texas, Kentucky, and I'm sorry, not Kentucky, Tennessee. All the case law has been very clear that if a kids with disabilities to be able to access regular education need an environment that is as medically safe as possible, that those are reasonable accommodations. Accommodations for a condition that isn't flaring. Again, that's what we talked about. Even if it's currently not a problem, have a plan in place for things that can become a problem. Again, morning exemptions, or even early excuses, or modified school days. And just so we're on the same page, if, for example, your kid can only attend school, and I've had situations, a child could only attend school 1 hour a day. That's all they could muster up. They're supposed to bus the children or provide transportation. That is not incumbent upon you to take your child to and from school if the child can only attend school. But a modified school day, they have to provide transportation. Examples of unreasonable accommodations. Here's what's unreasonable. If you're merely asking for something and I'll just be candid with you, because if your child doesn't need it, but you saw it on a checklist, and this is why I wanted to talk about the evaluation process. Any accommodation you ask for, and why that evaluation is so important, is because you want to be able to point to the evaluation that gives your evidence to why they need the accommodation. So, for example, if it's a situation that you saw movement breaks were something that you really thought would be useful for your child, and you say, I want my child to be able to stand up in class and stretch and relax, and you have that teacher who's like, I cannot have that. That's too disruptive to my class. That is not reasonable. You want to be able to go to that evaluation report and have it in there that talks about the need for that stretch and why that's important. And that can be provided through a medical information, provided through parental input, or provided through in terms of just general strategies that have worked with your kid before. But you want to have quote unquote evidence to be able to ask for that. So again, you want to be able to ask for accommodations. Make sure that they're always in line with what your kid needs. Not, again, because sometimes parents get scared and they just ask for everything, but you want to be able to back everything up that you're asking for based upon an actual need that you've identified previous to that meeting. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what do you have to do if your requests are denied? First of all, informal negotiation. I always talk about, when districts say no, and they do a lot, my first question back is not to argue, but to ask why. The reason for that is you want to figure out why they're denying you. Is it a staffing issue? Is it they just never did it before? You want to flush out why the why is, and then try to get around that. You also want to work up through the chain of command. So if you have a situation where you're having a difficulty with a teacher, go to whoever is supervising your case manager, whether it's your 504 or IEP. That doesn't go up to the director who's overseeing it. And then again, school board superintendent, you want to make sure that you exhaust those channels, because, the higher up you go, you may get a different response. But if it really is a situation that it's just not able to be worked out, there are many every state has some sort of alternative dispute resolution. It's usually mediation. And you can just go to your state's website, and they will explain the process and how you go about it. It's different in every state, but generally you have to put a request in, they assign a mediator, and then the mediation occurs. Some of them mediations are literally by trained mediators. Some of them are by administrative law judges. Some of them are in one state, it's a parent who's a lawyer who has a child with a disability. So it's going to be different in every state, but you do have alternative dispute resolutions. You can ask for an impartial hearing. That does have to be in writing. You have to file usually a complaint. The other thing you can do is file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. It's OCR. And that is where you fill out a complaint form. OCR will then do an investigation as to whether or not your rights were denied. And because, again, these are civil rights. And if your child was denied access to appropriate education, they will do an investigation. And then obviously, too, you can always seek an attorney to file a due process hearing or whatever your state regulations are in terms of 504 for a complaint about the 504 process. And we can go to the next slide. All right, tips for college students is that, because I now have one, is make sure you have a 504 plan walking in. You definitely don't want to have dismissed or not had that process. I would also just bluntly ask for an evaluation at the start of the senior year. Some schools want some recent testing. And if you wait too long to the end of the school year and they aren't going to do it, you may need to pay for that testing, because while 504 plans apply to colleges, it isn't a situation that because it's post-secondary, they aren't required to do the testing. And IDEA under no circumstance extends to college. It does extend to the age of majority, which in some states is 21. But once a child exits the public school system via a graduation, then a diploma effectively, then it's a situation where that child would no longer have access to IDEA. And definitely visit the college disabilities. I mean, listen, I have a kid in college right now. We visited the campus like 3 times between visiting schools, then going out for, once he was admitted, to do, days on the lawn is what they called it. And then at the end of it for orientation, you definitely want to go visit the college disability. You want to figure out what they need from you so that you have all that information in advance. And we can go to the next slide. And I guess we're at questions. So I don't know if we have any that were in the chat or where we stand, or Julie, you have questions?
Thank you, Heidi. Wow, what a wonderful presentation and tremendously valuable information. I wish I listened to you 12 years ago. I think I would have made a lot fewer mistakes. No way. So yeah, we do have some questions coming in. Okay. So the first one here is, what type of assessments would the school give to determine my child's arthritis needing a 504? And then there's a caveat, the second part of this. We've been in multiple schools in multiple states, and they only want a doctor's note. And they refuse any educational testing because my child makes good grades. So they immediately refuse an IEP.
Right. And that's the classic example of what I was talking about. So you want to definitely, when you put your request into writing, again, make sure everything is documented. And when I talk about this, sometimes I'll say you do an oatmeal pie email. So there's 2 layers. First, thank you so much for talking to me. I understand that you do not want to do complete and full testing. We believe it is our right to receive complete and full testing. And here is the testing that we want to address. Thank you again. Usually if you put stuff into writing that you've been told the mean they're not going to do, or, a teacher has indicated, that's a whole different flavor of Sunday to them than them simply telling you no. So you definitely want to document. And oftentimes you're going to get a response back that may be different than what you were said to me. Oh no, we're happy to do that. So when you're talking about JA, the testing that needs to be done is in terms of how it is impacting your kid. So if for JA, you want to get in, again, if they're asking for medical documentation, you definitely want to give it. But in terms of, so you want to give what they have from the doctors. But if your child, because again, what we're talking about is what does it take for your child to get those good grades? So if you're in a situation where it is costing them a lot, you definitely want to do some additional evaluations when it comes to like the social emotional functioning to establish whether or not how much impact that's really having on a kid. How stressed out are they? And there's, a lot of different rating forms that can be given to kids and even self-reports where they can talk about it. And this is one of those things, again, for the child really to have a voice in this process, because it really is important for them to also learn to self-advocate. It's for them to even do a written statement of what step by step what they have to do, or even you as parents what you have to do. Because listen, if it's a younger child, you and I both know you're sitting at the dining table going through these things again. So you definitely want to ask for any testing if it's the child's having difficulty with handwriting. So it takes the child, 20 minutes to write 2 sentences, you'd want to ask for an occupational therapy evaluation. If your child's having difficulty navigating, the school building or needs additional physical therapy, you would definitely want to ask for a physical therapy evaluation. If your child's missing a lot of school, again, you'd want to look to see if they are getting academic testing. And also, here's the other thing too, is if you have a child who is very bright, you definitely also want to ask for IQ testing. And here's why. If you have a child who's very bright, who has a physical disability, who's causing them to miss school, but they're able to pull it together, that they're on par with the other kids. But the reality is the law is designed to be individualized. And if you have a child who really should be able to be performing above the average range, so then that child's not receiving appropriate education. So if you have a child who's gifted or incredibly intelligent, the fact that they're just on grade level is actually behind for them. And that's why having that full testing of saying, listen, yeah, she may be getting A's and she might be performing in the average range, but she shouldn't be. And that's and all she's doing to get to this average range when she's capable of so much more. Because again, when they get to high school and stuff, you want your kids to have access to those higher level courses, but with the appropriate supports in place so that they can achieve success in them. It shouldn't be your kid does less than because it's harder for the district to provide the appropriate supports.
Great, thank you. Okay, question number 2. Are schools required to provide accommodations for PE class? And how can I ensure that my child safely can attend PE?
Okay. So yes, they have to absolutely require accommodations in any environment. So, and when I say any environment, I really do mean that. That means if your child needs supports for a school sponsored activity, such as sports, plays, and anything that they need some help in that, those laws extend to that situation as well. So in terms of PE, anytime they're in the school environment in a school sponsored activity, they are required to receive supports and services. So absolutely in PE. And candidly, I would touch base with the PE teacher. I would just ask, hey, and again, you don't want to, here's the thing. We all as parents want to say, we want to make sure you're doing things right. If you approach it that way, that's like going to turn them off. So you have to approach it kind of in a roundabout way and just say to the PE teacher, I wanted to know how it was going with whatever the accommodations were. Are they working for them? Do you see them struggling? Give them an opportunity to have to answer that. And then also be talking to the child about what is actually occurring in the class. And if there are concerns, you can bring it to the teacher if you're comfortable. Otherwise, you can bring it to an administrator who can kind of run some interference with you.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Question 3. What type of meeting were you referring to for a 504 plan? Our school just did emails and the 504 paperwork, but no meeting with parents and teachers or administration. We were diagnosed last year, but did a 504 this year. So the school was notified last year, so it's been ongoing in a process.
Okay, so there's supposed to be a 504 meeting where all people come together and collaborate. There was actually a recent case in Pennsylvania where the district did the same thing, where they just kind of did the paperwork, and they were actually held liable for compensatory education for that time because it denied the parents what's known as meaningful parental participation, because it's supposed to be there's supposed to be a meeting. Now it can be via Zoom, it can be like this, it can be remote, but where all people who are going to be creating that plan, that are necessary to create that plan, get together and discuss it, because it's supposed to be a group effort. It's not just supposed to be emails of separate people giving input and then a document being created. So you would definitely are able to ask for an if you feel your child's not getting the right services in sports, ask for an in-person, or for, virtual meeting, and have all the parties present to discuss the 504 plan.
Great, thank you. Let me ask another. We had some questions sent in advance as well, so I'm going to go to some of those now. What is the best way to advocate for a child who attends private school?
So if it is a strict private school, where it is not contendant in terms of receiving part of public education. And I'll just say, like in Pennsylvania, we have licensed private schools. We have public charter schools. And although some parents think that they're private school, they're actually full public schools. So assuming for the second, we're talking about a complete private school, you are entitled to a 504 plan. Now, it is a little bit different than in terms of the district, but you still can absolutely ask for that. That is something where I would advocate in terms of with private schools. And I've had some recent experience with that, because of the fact that several of my friends, especially after COVID, went to a lot of private schools. You don't have the same legal push, but in terms of private schools, their desire to make parents happy and accommodating, because you're paying them, is more incentivizing. Oftentimes with private schools, you're going to be doing a lot of educating. And I'm just going to be blunt, because, they really don't generally have special education. So you definitely want to start off with everything from an education standpoint. One of the best ways to do that is actually, though, even though your child's attending a private school, you can still get a free evaluation from the public school system, because you have a right to access that. So you can go to your public school system and say, listen, I really like to see what supports and services you can offer. I would like an evaluation, and get them to do an evaluation. And then that can give you the documentation and information that puts a better perspective for the private school. So getting that testing is still something I would suggest when you're dealing with just a strict private school, because again, a lot of times that's going to give you your proof and to that private school that this is what that child needs. And they are required to do a 504 and offer accommodations. And there is, legal mechanisms for that. So again, it's not just, them being nice, but the reality is you are going to have to come to it with a much more education, teaching them and educating them about JA and special education and 504 than other, public school systems.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question, a follow-up question related to our earlier 504 question. But the question is, how frequently should 504 plan meetings occur? And are there any regularly scheduled check-ins at school? I want to make sure the school is taking my child's diagnosis seriously and going through with the accommodations.
So this is the fun fact about a really old law. So no one reads it. In the really old law, what the law actually says is every district is supposed to promulgate procedures of how they're going to do these things, right? So you can actually go, and your district should have a 504 procedure checklist. And the reason I would always ask, and I always ask for it when I'm dealing with districts, because if that's their procedure, that becomes your rights. So usually in those procedures, there is a situation where they'll say, 504 plan meeting has to occur every so long, because there's nothing outlined in the law itself about how often they have to occur. Now, there always have to be appropriate. So there isn't an excuse that, well, we didn't have, or we didn't update it because we didn't have to. If it becomes inappropriate, then it becomes inappropriate. But that's where it would contain in terms of how often. You, though, can ask for a 504 meeting at any point in time. And so to me, my advice in all candor is to do it if it's on you to ask for it every year. But I would also be asking the districts for the 504 procedures. Now, I also would not always be surprised if some districts don't have it, because again, this is an old law and not everyone reads the law. So they might not even be aware that they have it, or whenever it was drafted back in 1973, they don't know where that document is and everyone forgot about it since then. But you definitely want to ask for that. And, if you just ask for them to have the procedures of what the procedures of the district are. But if you feel that your child's not receiving appropriate programming, ask for a meeting immediately. And there's no limit. So for some kids, if it's really bad, sometimes 504 meetings and IEP meetings are happening on a monthly basis. I mean, even a bi-weekly basis. So it just, again, depends on the kid. But I would recommend, just as a general rule of thumb, you definitely want to be meeting with your school team at least once a year to address things, because every year it's going to change. Every year you're going to have a new set of people. And, kids aren't static, and needs change and evolve.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. My son has an IEP for autism and JIA. He's entering high school, was hospital bound for middle school due to extreme flares, had some virtual tutoring, but the high school said they can't accept any credits unless they're in school or through the state's virtual school alternative. When they do pay for a tutor, they are not licensed teachers. They are Paris. So in regards to credits, can the high school do this?
Okay. So again, I cannot speak to your state law because I don't know. If you're in Pennsylvania, I could speak to it. But what I can tell you is, in terms of the IDEA and 504, absolutely you can change the requirements. That is actually the whole point of a 504 and IDEA, is that if there are legal barriers, you can change them. You could say, we're not going to hold a child to this requirement to be able to get to the same place as somebody else was. So legally, there is nothing preventing that. And in fact, they're supposed to be ensuring that that child's making progress. One of the things that, oftentimes districts will do is they will say no and then make the child do extra work. That's basically discrimination. I mean, think about it. If your child is having to do extra or do more than because of their disability, that is the whole point of what discrimination is. So when they're pushing back on you, you want to be pushing back on them to say, well, then how do you plan to address this? How do you plan to make him successful where he doesn't have to do more than kids without disabilities would have to do so that he is able to graduate? Instead of them making it your problem to fix with your child, or he has to do work, it's their legal requirement to offer you a plan of success. So I would push back at them and saying, listen, he has a right as a student with a disability to have access to, the same, not be required to do more than other kids are. So how is it you plan to make up for this? Because he shouldn't be punished for a manifestation of his disability, and his disability manifested itself in a hospitalization, and you're now punishing him for that disability. And we're not going to be accepting that. So how do you plan to address it?
Okay, great. Can schools take 504 plans away?
School districts can dismiss from 504. But here's an interesting, fun little fact about 504. And this has never been litigated. So just understand that. But it really you cannot in 504 change a child's placement without evaluations. That used to be part of the IDEA pre-2004, okay? Then when 2004 came, they switched that. Why that's important is districts oftentimes, if a kid now again, remember the big circle, little circle, right? Big circle, you're still, even if you're in the little circle, you're still part of that 504, but nobody pays attention to that segment of the 504 plan. I think when you're dealing with a strict, especially if you have a kid with an IEP, they're changing placements all the time, and they're not doing reevaluations all the time. But if you have a kid who they're pulling away all supports and services and they have not evaluated, I would ask for an independent educational evaluation, because they violated that procedural of taking it away without the proper procedures and due process. Now that is actually contained again in the 504.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Another question, and I may join on this one too a little bit. But the question is, my child isn't always vocal when she or he isn't feeling well. And as a result, his teachers think she's fine and doesn't need accommodations. How do I get them to understand that the plan always needs to be followed, even when my child seems fine.
So that is a classic situation that I think impacts a lot of disabilities. Now, there's several things you can do. One is, what has been an effective technique that parents have done that I think kind of surprises districts is districts only see the output. They don't see the behind the scenes, and really laying it out. I'm saying step by step. I just wanted to let you know last night, like this is what she goes through on a daily, like this is just last night. And so that they have, and it's documented. In terms of for kids, generally kids don't want to bring attention to themselves. So if there are ways, and one of the and I forget where I heard this from. It was not my idea. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I wish it was mine, but it's not. And I would give credit to where I got it from, but I don't remember. But there's nonverbal ways of a kid can communicate, like wearing a different color bracelet if they're having a more difficult day, and that way they're not having to vocalize it. It's not communicating to any of their partners. Listen, she's wearing one of those blue rubber band bracelets, or a ring, or just even whatever it is that they can communicate it. But and I would, that is a skill that, and that's hard for kids because they all want to be, quote unquote normal. And it isn't until you grow up and that you realize nobody's normal. We're all unique in our own way. That doesn't make us, good, bad. It actually makes us great. And JA is just part of her child's story. You know what I mean? And that's the thing about it is one of the things that I always, when I talk to kids, will always tell them is that part of your story and the resilience and stuff that she learns from having it is actually one of the things that in terms of larger success in life will be better for her. Unfortunately, I wish, it's a path that the easy resistance and the easy path leads to the most success. I often find the kids who've had the most adversity actually are the most successful. I'll be candid with you. I have 3 kids. I have 2 with special needs. I will say that they are more successful in terms of what they're able to accomplish than my middle one who has no disabilities, because he's just walking through life thinking it's easy. And then, when it gets hard, he decompensates, where the other ones have reset buttons. But the reality is I would also encourage for her to get into maybe some support groups. I think JA runs a lot of good youth programs where it becomes just part of their story and not something that they are uncomfortable about advocating for. So there's that aspect. But I think in terms of the district, getting that also additional testing that I talked about with the IQ achievement, let's get those numbers really on the screen and let's see how quote unquote successful she is. Because one of the dirty little facts of education is, that A that you get, right? When we went to school, you got an A if you got that score. Well, even in high level AP courses, there's test corrections. If a kid doesn't do well, they give opportunities. So, to me, that's one of the things. But Julie, I know that you had some thoughts, or you want to join on this one too.
Yeah, I think similarly, my kids and I know some of their peers have used the bracelets. That I think the different color coding of the bracelets has been good. We've also used different color cards on the desk. So if our child wanted to go up and take a stretch walk in the hall, they didn't want to ask the teacher to sort of be interrupted for that. So they put a yellow card on their table, and the teacher knew that was their cue that they were going to go and take a walk. So I think having those strategies so that the child can communicate that there's some things going on. And I think, we had lots of conversations about how, a lot of the things that kids deal with are you can't see who. So it's not that they aren't there. It's just that you can't see them. The kids are still dealing with them. So it's that continual sort of reminder about that. And the Arthritis Foundation has some good tools for that for teachers. So on arthritis.org/school, there's some resources for teachers and resources how to talk with teachers about hidden disabilities. And the other thing real quick I'll advocate for is the kids. I've been really fortunate to be able to get our kids and our family to the Juvenile Arthritis Foundation's Family Summit and their family conference. And that's a really great way for the kids to say, I'm having this issue with school. How are people handling this? So we heard about the bracelets through going to a conference, and a kid was talking about how they were communicating some of these with their teachers, and that gave us some additional ideas. So really take the advantage of that if you can. All right, so next question. My daughter's JIA is mild. Am I legally obligated to tell that the school no?
Yeah, no, you're not legally required to tell the school district any disability. To me though, again, if you're in a situation, you definitely don't want to be in a wait to fail model. If it's mild now, that's great. But again, having that safety net in place, if it becomes a situation where it isn't, just know that without that safety net, if she has a bad flare or it gets really bad on a quick basis, it can be a long process. Most of the times you're not getting evaluations done for 60 days, depending on, each state may have different requirements. That's, because they're allowed to do that. So unfortunately that can lead to situations where, and I'll just give an example. You have a kid go back, they're doing very well. Then you start to see the impact. Now it's November. You're asking for a testing in November. You're not now getting the testing back till sometime late January, early February. Then you have to do the plan. Now you're not getting the plan in place till like March. So again, just understand that the education system does not work fast, but no, you are not legally required to disclose that information.
Great, thank you. So we are beginning to come to the end of our question and answer and discussion period. I wanted to ask one more question, Heidi, and another question too just came in about this. But how do we? This all sounds really great. It's super helpful information. I think some of the hard times are when we have to have the battles with the school. So, for example, a school administrator is the person who's leading that, particularly in our situation, it was in the elementary schools. So, how do we have that conversation? How do we fight the battles? And in our end, we needed to pull in an educational advocate. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that might work to sort of help that process of navigating the resistance, I guess, navigating the challenges that you get from the school.
Yeah. So the first thing in navigating the challenges is finding out the reason for the challenge, because you're going to try to so asking a lot of questions. If they say, she can't do that, we can't do that. Why? And keep pushing back and say, and you don't have to be, because again, you're sending your child here. You want to be as collegial as possible. You don't want to be in an adversarial position. So you want to keep saying why. And then my favorite phrase is listen. And a lot of times in IEP meetings, I'm almost like Columbo, because even though I know how this is all going to go, I'm just trying to get you to explain it to me. So, you could say, I don't understand. Can you help me out? Why is it if she takes a stretch break and she walks out of the classroom, how is that impacting other kids? Why is that a disruption if she's doing it quietly? So if there's a kid when kids go out for our kids not allowed to go to the bathroom, if a kid has a medical emergency, are they not allowed? Like, is this like why, and you kind of want to walk them through that kind of disconnect. Now that can usually get you a long way in terms of why, figure out what the reasons is. And sometimes it's a scheduling issue. And then listen, be collaborative and reasonable with the scheduling request. Like, we only have someone available. Well, that's not going to work. How can we do it a different way? One of the things is if it's a support service that you're asking for guidance counselor, and let's say you're in a district who the guidance counselor's in there 1 day a week, and the 1 day she's in, your child cannot miss classes that day, well, then propose Zoom. Because again, a lot of times you're dealing with rigidity of thinking of district's part, and you being as creative as possible solution making. It is difficult to do that. One of the things I do encourage parents to do is, this is the biggest strength. There is strength in numbers. And one of the most powerful things to get advocacy for your kids is not to go it alone. I actually started a parents group in my own district, because if you're all isolated islands, and there's nothing magical that I did, during COVID, because they were not servicing our kids, we started a Facebook group. Start a Facebook group, get word on the street, start having meetings. Have a situation when there's power in numbers, because that becomes more scary. Start talking to school board members if you're really having difficult situations. But let's just take that out of it. In terms of the meeting, having someone there who's more experienced for you. And I will just say this as a parent, when you are an experienced parent, because by the time you get through the ringer, pay it forward. If you had parents that came with you who were experienced, were able to navigate the system better, then do that for the younger generation, of parents who are starting off and going with them to the meeting and helping them learn the process and helping push the ball forward. The more knowledgeable you are, and I will say that came from me as learning to be an attorney, because I came fresh out of law school. I was 25 years old. I had gone to law school. I did not go to education school. I sat in that meeting and they started throwing acronyms at me. And, I'll be candid with you, I was not a very effective advocate over 20 years ago. But part of it is the more you educate yourself coming to the JA summits, the more you can speak their lingo, you are starting to be scary to them. Document everything. If you have to, advocates are great resources, especially if you're new to this process, because they will cut through that whole situation because they're experienced. There are education law centers in generally every state. There is supposed to be a parent training center in every state. They're called different names. That's legally required and funded by the federal government. Like in the state of Pennsylvania, it's Peel. In Delaware, it's Pitt. But there are education law centers where you can get free advice, advocacy services. So I would push the ball, and that's all free. And trainings that you can do. But here's the thing. One thing that I will say is the quickest ways to lose is to stop. That's how you lose. And if you keep pushing the ball forward up the food chain, take them to mediation. If you need an attorney or an impartial, go to that. Let them know that it's going to constantly, there are battles that, if you need it for your kid, you're going to push it forward. And again, OCR can, if your situations like the one, the person who said we don't need testing, right, and who had received no testing, you can file an OCR complaint. The OCR will come in and do an evaluation, and I can tell you that's a quick and easy one. They're going to say, listen, the 504 requires evaluation. Where is it? And they're not going to have it. And then they're going to tell the corrective action, you need to do an evaluation. So again, pushing that ball forward in a collaborative, collegial, I call it the iron fist with the velvet glove. I'm very nice, but you don't back down. And that's really where you're going to make changes. Systematic changes, though, again, getting parent groups together and becoming a block, running for school board. I mean, I'll just be 100%. I'm running for school board right now because the fact that our kids of special don't have a voice on our board, and they need that. So as much as you can do to fix the system as well as can really change the system for you.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. I'm going to have to end our question and discussion period, given our timing for our webinar. But thank you so much, Heidi. It was really wonderful to have you. Your expertise was phenomenal. And really thank you for your time and for sharing your incredible expertise and candid experiences as well. So many thanks. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Okay, so I am going to wrap up our webinar tonight by going over some resources that may be of interest to you. So this slide here shows about some of the Connect groups through the Arthritis Foundation. These groups can really, really, really provide a great sense of community and support. So please feel free to check these out if you've been going, continue to go, or check them out if you haven't. But they're really wonderful here. So we've got September, October, and several in November. If you want to have questions about them, feel free to go to arthritisfoundation.org and you'll find them, or they will get that information for you. We can go to slide 18, please. So I just wanted to highlight again, the Arthritis Foundation has a great tool for school supports for 504s and IEPs. This is the Educational Rights Toolkit. You can find this on the website, and it's really a great resource for you. You can share it with your school as you have that conversation to navigate and develop what your children need. This is free. It's free, and you can download it. Again, you can get that at arthritis.org/school. There are webinars that are also available for you. The Arthritis Foundation hosts several webinars that will help your child and you manage their illness. These are series about JA and emotional health, as well as chronic pain. So take a look at those recordings and hop onto those. You might be interested in joining the Arthritis Foundation's monthly webinars. And the next webinar is on chronic pain. There's podcast series that you're also welcome to access and listen to. This is at the arthritis.org/podcast. Also, great information on how to manage your child's disease and how to sort of work this with your family. There's a helpline the Arthritis Foundation offers to support you and your children on this journey. And then last but not least, please fill out the survey that you will receive in the mail so that we can get your information and get your feedback on this type of webinar so that we know what to do and can make sure we do the best thing for you for the future. So lastly, thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and we can take care, and I think we will sign off for tonight. Thank you all.